Welcome to Living Outside the Matrix, the show where we go just a bit further than the mainstream narrative, asking searching questions in order to achieve optimal health and to thrive, to really discover the information that isn't immediately there. Hi there, I'm your host Nigel Howitt, and on the show today we are going to look at that all-important basis of our health, water, a clean supply, an adequate supply, and of course the ultimate end goal, getting that water into the cells and achieving that goal for optimal health of proper cellular hydration. It's one thing to drink lots of water and drink sufficient that you go to the bathroom very often and that your pee is clear, but is it really getting into the cells? So to kick off with, let's just acknowledge that there is some increasing awareness of the need to drink. If the evidence of the plethora of plastic bottles carried around by people tells us anything, particularly sports people playing various sports seem to be almost obsessed with drinking a lot of water. But is what they are drinking a decent quality, and is it getting into the body's cells? So there's a number of myths out there that I'm hoping to dispel in this episode. Water is essential to all life, and here in the UK and in much of the Western world we tend to think that tap water is the way forward. We've cured cholera and a lot of the diseases that came from drinking dirty water. But there remains a question these days over the quality of tap water. A lot of things have changed, a lot of things have found their way into modern tap water, so there's a big question mark over the safety in the long term of drinking modern municipal tap water. Obviously it's not going to kill you in the short term, but what are the long term costs, what are the long term hazards and health issues that may well result from drinking tap water for many, many years? So we'll look into that. Proper hydration requires sufficient high quality water. So the human body is about 72% of water, and this varies with age, of course, and with a number of other factors. So let's have a look at the things that we need water for. What actually is it that we're achieving by making sure we've got adequate water? Well, to start off with, it facilitates digestion. It makes digestion possible, you could say. The assimilation of nutrients as food passes through the gut relies on water, and that starts with the secretion of amylase in our saliva in the mouth, which is largely water. The blood is 90% water, and this is used to transport nutrients and antibodies all around the body. So adequate hydration equals good supply of nutrients. It equals improved blood circulation. Temperature regulation is also achieved by the secretion of water from sweat glands and the skin, so that's another important one. Respiration at the cellular level requires water. Detoxification, when we're properly hydrated at the cellular level, we can effectively get rid of toxins from the cells, and it's a really key component of properly detoxifying is to be adequately hydrated. It also has been shown to promote weight loss to consume sufficient water. It boosts the immune system and helps the immune system prevent you from suffering various illnesses and colds and flus and all that sort of thing. Adequate hydration also prevents cramps and sprains, because proper hydration helps keep joints lubricated and muscles more elastic, so joint pain is reduced. It's also the easiest way to prevent headaches. The first thing to do when you feel a headache coming on is reach for a glass of water. Very often that will cure it. And also our skin is 80% water, and it's really important to be adequately hydrated to get that healthy glowing look and for the skin to retain its flexibility. So these are the reasons why we need sufficient hydration. We need to drink sufficient water and get it into the cells. So let's just have a brief look at some of the symptoms of insufficient hydration. We know when we often when we feel thirsty, it's actually too late. We're already in a dehydrated state. So, and even for elderly people, it's worth noting as you get older, our thirst mechanism becomes less efficient. So we really it behoves us to pay extra special attention to our water and liquid consumption. And it's worth saying here as a quick aside that juicing vegetables is a supply of water. If you eat, cucumbers and things like that, there's a lot of water in various foods. So and teas and coffees and these sorts of things, herbal teas especially, a very good way of getting water. We're not talking about just drinking pure water. But when we do get dehydrated, the first thing that we'll probably notice, apart from the possible headache, is that our urine darkens in colour, and we may also feel tired. There's been research that shows that as little as a 5% reduction in your hydration can result in a 25 to 30% loss of energy. So when you're feeling a bit lethargic, reach for a glass of water. The skin becomes dry also when we're dehydrated. We become more susceptible to urinary tract infections. And it's been shown that dehydration also can exacerbate conditions such as multiple sclerosis and chronic fatigue syndrome. And also lastly, premature aging results from not getting enough water into the body cells, getting that cellular hydration. It's very, very important. So even if we drink sufficient water, it's still possible to not attain adequate hydration. But first of all, let's look at the sources of water that are open to us. I mentioned at the beginning that tap water is not a good one. Let's look at the optimal sources of water. Well, top of the list is fresh mountain spring water. This is the best water you can drink. It's structured, it's full of electrolytes, it's free from pollution. It's alive water, and there's a great resource in the United States called findaspring.com, which can help you actually locate your nearest spring. And it may sound crazy, you might think, gosh, there aren't many springs around, but you'd be surprised. Second best is well water or borehole water, literally groundwater. This obviously depends on your location, but it's generally a very good second best. It can still be advisable to test it though, to check what's in it, and again it totally depends where you are located. And also it can be advisable to actually filter your groundwater as well, but we'll come on to that. So number 3 is filtered water, and this assumes filtered tap water, to be quite honest, but as I just said, even if you drink the groundwater, it still may be necessary. And it's important to remember that, especially if you were drinking tap water, that any filter is better than nothing, because if you're drinking lots and lots of impurities and toxins and various things, your body can literally become the filter, and you end up in your cells and in your fat tissues storing a lot of these toxins. Fourth on the list is bottled water. Not a particularly good option, I would say, but it is acceptable in the short term. If you're traveling, if you can't if you can't access your home better quality water, then of course this has to be considered. But it is very important not to drink from plastic bottles. Plastic bottles can leach various toxins into the water that they contain, particularly bisphenol A and other nasty toxic compounds. And this could be exacerbated just by crinkling and flexing the bottle. A lot of bottles of water these days are very flexible. You can just imagine that sound as you squish the bottle. As you deform the plastic, it's more likely to be leaching toxicity into the water. And also heat has the same effect. So leaving a bottle of water on the back window of your car or something, or in summer conditions. Bad news to be drinking bottled water. So it's all sold in plastic bottles, is the upshot of it. But you really need to carry water around in a glass bottle. Glass being inert, the water doesn't react with it. So take your water from home, preferably filtered, in a glass bottle, and carry that with you. Fifth on the list of your water options is from the tap. I consider this is way too polluted to drink safely, and shouldn't really be consumed regularly. I mean, again, the only time I would drink tap water would be if there was really nothing else, and I was really dehydrated. Obviously couldn't make it to the next source of acceptable water, and that's in the very, very short term is the main point. Distilled water. Drinking this is not a particularly good idea. It's, apart from it being destructured, it's also stripped of its minerals and all the electrolytes, and can therefore pull minerals out of the body during its passage through. So distilled water, not a particularly good idea. It can be used in the short term for detoxification purposes. Next on the list I've got is alkaline water. This became fashionable a few years ago, but not many experts that have really looked into this recommend it. Particularly for prolonged use. Again, it can interfere with stomach acid production, and it can also it can have a place if used in conditions of detoxification, but again, it's only for a maximum of 1 to 2 weeks, and it's for short-term use at very best. Lastly, vitamin waters and all these crazy flavoured waters sold, these water products, really not a good idea. It's something of a gimmick, really, and to start off with, it's made from distilled water, and it can have all sorts of things in it, from high fructose corn syrup to sweeten it, preservatives, artificial flavourings, and a little bit of colouring perhaps. You get those pinky colours. Not really an option, I would say. So the other thing, while I remember, is that bottled water, it's been shown that around about 40% of that is actually tap water bottled up. So that's another reason to avoid your bottled water. So you can, of course, for optimal water, juice vegetables, and this is quite a good way of getting structured, high electrolyte water, and also drinking coconut water. That's another quite a useful option, because that's packed with electrolytes. It also contains lauric acid, which is antiviral, antibacterial, and so forth. So that's a good option. So let's move on to having a look at what is wrong with tap water. So the myth out there that all our water suppliers would like to have us believe is that tap water is a perfectly healthy, safe option for your proper hydration. But depending where you are, it can have all manner of nasty toxins in it. So we'll go through a full list here of, as a result of my research. They may not all be in your tap water, but it's going to have all sorts of nasties in. Let's just have a look at a few. These are in no particular order, actually, and there's some quite important ones towards the end of the list. Arsenic. This carcinogen is found at high levels in tap water in the US, and it's also found in some groundwater, particularly here in England and also in the USA as well, which is another reason to filter. So you don't want to be drinking that. Aluminium, or aluminum as some other countries call it. I think in the States you refer to it as aluminum. This is known to increase your risk of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease. It's been associated with hyperactivity and learning disorders in children, and also gastrointestinal disease. So you don't want to be drinking aluminium. Fluoride. This is a very big issue, and there's a lot of people campaigning to have fluoride removed from water. Fluoride is actually added into the water supply by some water providers under the guise of it allegedly being put there to protect our dental health and prevent tooth decay. And this is just a complete nonsense and a smokescreen. It's an industrial byproduct, which is a convenient way of getting rid of it is to put it into the water, and it's also been associated with all sorts of detrimental mental effects. It's been said to have been used by the Nazis in concentration camps to render people more malleable and compliant. There's a whole load of nasty things around fluoride, not to mention the fact that of course, to mass medicate without people's consent is seriously unethical and shouldn't be happening for that reason alone. But it is also bad for us. I heard once that some toothpaste, if a child ingests enough toothpaste with fluoride in it, it can cause some serious problems. So that's another thing to make sure that you, of course, use a toothpaste that doesn't have fluoride in it, and don't buy into any of this nonsense that it's good for your teeth. Prescription drugs, huge amounts of prescription drugs and their residues and byproducts after they've passed through the human body are obviously peed out and find their way into the sewer, and much municipal tap water is simply recycled again and again and again. So prescription drugs, over-the-counter drugs, the same thing applies. There are loads of these in the water supply. Also here we should probably add in estrogen mimicking compounds, birth control pills. Huge swathes of the population take them and they pee them straight into the sewers, and they therefore find their way into the municipal tap water. The same goes, by the way, for hormone replacement therapy drugs, progesterone, estrogen, and even men topping up with testosterone. This all finds its way into the tap water, and it really has no place there at all. So that's another reason to avoid it. Antibiotics. There are huge amounts of antibiotics everywhere, from agricultural runoff and again from people peeing into the sewers. Antibiotics are a problem. There are many water supplies have traces of antibiotics in there as well. Chlorine is an obvious one. That's not something that I'd want to drink on a regular basis. It is not that harmful in and of itself, but it does cause huge problems, and this is a very big one, and I've saved this one till the last, and this is disinfection byproducts. So what happens is, they put the chlorine into our water supply to kill off microbes, bacteria, fungi, viruses, all these tiny little microbes. But the chlorine in the water reacts with natural organic matter in the water, such as fulvic and humic acid, and it creates these carcinogenic compounds. And this is probably one of the worst things in your water. Certainly about 1,000 times more serious than ingesting the actual chlorine, and probably a lot of the other things in water as well. So there are things called trihalomethanes, THMs. These are cancer group B carcinogens and are known to trigger the production of free radicals. There are also volatile organic compounds. These are other forms of disinfection byproducts, and these can damage the central nervous system, cause drowsiness and things. And also there are haloacetic acids, HAAs. This is another probable carcinogen. So tap water is worth avoiding for a whole host of reasons, and the exact nature of your tap water will totally depend on where you are, but hopefully that kind of run through will give you an idea of the dangers posed to your health if you drink it regularly. So the conclusion is, don't drink tap water unless you absolutely have to. And with the point about chlorine and the disinfection byproducts, it's also worth mentioning that this relates to public swimming baths as well, where there's a lot of chlorine added, and a lot of these disinfection byproducts are produced in swimming pools. So the upshot of that is to filter your water, and there are a number of filtration options we can look at, and I would say that filtering your water, if you do drink tap water, is an absolute health priority. And as mentioned, even if it comes from a well or a borehole. Filtration systems can basically be point of use, or they can be whole house, and then you could get specific filters for showers. So let's have a look at a few. The first one is the pitcher or jug filter. That's become quite popular. A lot of people are using them, but the disadvantage of those, or the fact about those, is that they are largely cosmetic in that they tend to work best at dealing with the odour of the water and also the taste, but they don't really get to the heart of the matter. Number 2 on my list here, there is not too many, but the reverse osmosis filter. These are very good. They're good at getting most contaminants out of water, even fluoride, but they don't get absolutely all of it out. But they do, on the downside, also remove a lot of natural minerals and again electrolytes, which are all important for maintaining the cellular hydration as well as just getting enough water physically into your body. So if we use a reverse osmosis filter system, it's worth adding things like Himalayan mineral salt to add electrolytes back into the water. Number 3 is ion exchange filters, and these are designed basically to remove dissolved salts from the water, such as calcium and things, and these soften the water and can neutralize the any harmful effects of scale build-up, particularly in pipes and fittings in the house. Number 4 on the list of your 5 options is granular carbon and carbon block filters. These are very good at removing organic chemicals such as herbicides, pesticides and industrial chemicals, and they are often used in addition to the other forms of filtration such as the reverse osmosis. And so basically you can get a lot of products, some whole house systems that will incorporate both of these filtration methods. And lastly, I've got distillation filters, and this is basically the distillation process is just boiling water and then condensing it, and of course the water, as it evaporates and into the vapor state, leaves behind almost everything. So the distillation process tends to remove, again, all of the natural minerals and all of the benefits of the water, and it destructures it. So it's important that to be aware that you're removing all natural minerals and again the electrolytes. So not a top of the list option unless you do something about that. So once we've secured the right supply of water, and we've worked out whether or not we're going to filter it, and chosen the correct filter. There's a whole load of filtration systems on the market, and I think you have to just do your own research. As I said, a lot of them combine these various different filtration methods, but I would certainly recommend looking into a whole house filtration system, and even a filtration system if, as I said, you're using a well. So how much water should we drink? Well, there has been a lot said. A lot of people tend to think that if you just drink sufficient that your pee turns clear, that will do. But although it's a good guideline to look, urine should be a sort of a light straw colour, but it ideally should have some colour. So if your pee is completely clear, this could mean that you're certainly throwing enough water down your neck, but it doesn't mean that it's actually getting into your cells. A good rule of thumb offered by Dr. Zach Bush is to aim for approximately 1 ounce of water per kilogram of your body weight. And at the same time, keep an eye on the colour as well, and look for that light straw colour. It can be very easy when we get sucked into our modern lives to sort of forget completely about drinking. It's not really something that's on our radar. But if we want optimal health, if we want health, we really have to try and bring that into our awareness. We have to try and be aware of how much we're drinking, how much we're peeing, and just become conscious of this. on an ongoing basis, and it really is another form of becoming more conscious. Our activity levels, and of course if you're exercising heavily, all of these variables need to be taken into account, but that's a good rule of thumb. There is one thing that's worth noting, however, and these days, particularly for sportsmen and women, there is a tendency to overdrink, to every 2 or 3 minutes you see people reaching for that bottle of water and gulping a few sips, and this really isn't as necessary as we think. If we're adequately hydrated, you can run around and play a game for 40 minutes to an hour at a time. Obviously maybe having a drink at half time or something, of course, but we don't need to keep reaching for the bottle of water. It's something of an irrational obsession that's worth guarding against. And Professor Tim Noakes wrote a great book called Waterlogged: The Serious Problem of Overhydration in Endurance Sports, and you may want to check out that. It can actually be very hazardous to attempt to overdrink, to overhydrate. So what can we actually do to boost our hydration? So let's just have a little recap and run through a few things here. First up is to be mindful, to think about our water consumption. Also, we want to be mindful to drink a good quality water. We want to specifically avoid drinking tap water or plastic bottled water. Your best bet is a mountain spring or a well or a borehole. If you do have a borehole, remember to test the water quality first. You might get away without needing to filter it, but installing a whole house system is still a good idea. And it's also worth remembering to adequately ventilate your bathroom, because another way that chlorine and disinfection byproducts can enter the body is by inhaling them. And this is when they become vapor. They essentially evaporate out of the water when you're in the shower, when you're in the bath, and even from toilets. So the bathroom, an area where there's a lot of water going on, if it is tap water, it's a good idea to keep that ventilated. So getting water into the cells, using the supplement Restore is a very good option. I've spoken about this supplement before on other episodes. It's made by Biomic Sciences Limited, based in Florida, and it's an excellent supplement for aiding cellular hydration. Increases cellular communication, and importantly increases the electrical charge across the actual cell membrane, and this helps each body cell actually draw more water in. So we know that water is one of the best scrubbers, the best means of cleaning the body, but detoxifying the body, but it can only do that if it can actually get into the cell. So I would seriously consider supplementing with the Restore. I don't advocate many supplements, but Restore is one of them, and for hydration, as well as of course sealing your gut membrane from your nose all the way through, to make sure that is not permeated. And you can look back at some other episodes of that. I've spoken to Zach Bush about this very issue. Check out the links in the on the blog post, which is linked to beneath the video. So also, to further the goal of optimal hydration, you may wish to consider magnesium supplementation in the form of a float tank experience. To go for a float tank is basically to lie in a bath of very high concentrated Epsom salts, and this enables you to float very easily. It's a bit like going to the Red Sea in Israel, where you float up out of the water. But it's a really good way of getting a huge infusion of magnesium into your body, which greatly facilitates your cellular hydration, pulling that water actually into the body cells. And given that almost all of us are hugely magnesium deficient, the float tank is a really good way of maximizing your magnesium levels in a really big way. So lastly, another factor that's probably little known that in order to become fully hydrated on a cellular level, it really helps if you can minimize your EMF exposure. And again, I've talked about this a few episodes ago, but all of the EMF, whether it be mains wiring around your bed through all of the pulsed microwave electromagnetic fields, in Wi-Fi, cell phone use, in smart meters, baby monitors, Bluetooth, all of these things, for a whole host of health reasons, and particularly decelerating your rate of aging, and to get properly cellularly hydrated, you want to seriously consider minimizing your exposure to EMFs. So I hope you find that this has been helpful. Remember that optimal health really requires adequate hydration as a foundational component, and not only getting the water down your neck, but also making sure that you get it into the cells. And drinking, I forgot to mention actually, one other thing you can do is buy electrolyte supplements. I'm still experimenting with a few. I haven't got any recommendations on that, but there are various supplementations, powders and capsules that you can use to boost your water with electrolytes. Even adding a squeeze of lemon juice and lime juice into your water is another way of achieving that. So I hope you got some benefit with it from this, and I do hope it helps you achieve your health goals. Please feel free to visit the website lawfulrebel.com. There's a whole lot more there. So thank you very much for listening and for watching, and I do hope you'll join me again for another episode of Living Outside the Matrix.
Change you want to see.